I remember when I first started doing stand-up comedy in LA, one of the first themes or common tropes that I heard from West Coast comedians was that Asians were terrible drivers. Any visit to a comedy store or an improv or a laugh factory, and you'd surely hear a few Asian terrible driver riffs. And if a comedian was bombing, you could bet a gallon of flop sweat that they'd blurt out their Asian bad driver lines, and the laughs somehow would start flowing. I never understood why that was. I mean, I have driven untold thousands of miles in SoCal, and I never observed a pattern of poor driving habits from Asian folks. Well, okay. Once I was rear-ended at a stoplight by a young man who might have been Asian. I think he was Asian. I didn't think to ask him if he was, because frankly, that would have been rude. I mean, can you imagine that? Hey, man, are you Asian? What I did ask, after I observed that my bumper was indeed dented, was if he would kindly provide me with his driver's license and proof of insurance, which he did indeed kindly provide. And then upon his request, I not so kindly provided him with mine. After all, he was at fault and I had a right to be mildly perturbed, if not slightly angry, after which we exchanged some curt pleasantries, shook hands, and I drove away. And once back on the road, it occurred to me that, now I would be thoroughly justified to do some Asian terrible driver jokes. I had earned that right, but I thought better of it. It offended my sensibilities as a comedian. Besides, one fender bender by one Asian didn't necessarily prove in my mind that all Asians were bad drivers, but it did offer proof that maybe that one Asian guy who rear-ended me shouldn't have been texting while he was driving, but that's another story. Anyway, I doubt many Asian folks actually think of themselves as Asian. And it's sort of like I doubt American Indians think of themselves as Indian. My guess is that most American Indians think of themselves as Cherokee or Navajo or Chumash or Lakota or Comanche. And similarly, my guess is that Asian folks think of themselves as Korean or Thai or Japanese or Cambodian or Malaysian or Vietnamese or, of course, Chinese. And of course, if you're from China, you probably don't think of yourself as Chinese, but you might think of yourself as Cantonese or Taiwanese or Hakka or Min or Han-Dong or Hunan or Mongol or any number of ethnic divisions that exist within the vast Asian continent. To be sure, Asians, like the rest of us, come in many varieties. Smart Asians, dumb Asians, kind Asians, mean Asians, honest Asians, and dishonest Asians. Certainly there are enough Asians to fill out all the categories. And growing up as I did in the western perimeter of that vast, all-white suburban wasteland known as the San Fernando Valley in the latter half of the 20th century, there were very few Asians of any sort to be found. As a matter of fact, during the 10 frightful years of the American War in Vietnam, I never saw one North Vietnamese person, not one. But apparently they were trying to take my freedom because they were communists. At least that's what they said on the news, but that's another story. Anyway, the few Asians that I did notice at good old Taft High generally got really good grades and by and large went to really good colleges. As a matter of fact, the Asians that I observed were not at all that different from myself and my Jewish friends who also got pretty good grades and went to pretty good colleges. Also, I often wondered why so many Jewish folks were absolutely crazy for Chinese cuisine. Was this a coincidence or some sort of mystical connection? On any Sunday night, most Chinese restaurants in the San Fernando Valley would be packed with ravenous Jews, myself amongst them. By my teenage years, I was already an expert on the multiple varieties of wonton soup. I would have gladly accepted employment as a wonton soup critic. I could have written Russian novels about the glorious wonton dumpling and the mysterious meaty morsel wrapped inside. I would have waxed euphoric about the cunning subtleties of the broth and the strange vegetables that floated therein. The anthropologist within me wondered if there was some strange relationship between those wonton dumplings and those softball-sized matzo balls. Matzo balls and wontons living side by side each other in a strange land like long-lost cousins. This could not be a coincidence. Could it be that wontons and matzo balls are descended from the same common ancestor? Could it be that one of those 12 tribes, instead of wandering 40 years in the desert, took a right turn out of Egypt and followed that spice trail all the way to Asia, which at that time had very few Asians? As a matter of fact, I don't think the Asians actually got to Asia until a few thousand years ago, and when they did, maybe, just maybe, they brought some of those unleavened matzo balls with them, which later, over time, evolved into those curious and beloved wontons. And once the wontons evolved into their current form over in Asia, it would only be a matter of time before they arrived in those Chinese restaurants in the San Fernando Valley. All of this brings me to the problem of the present moment. How do we, as right-minded, overprivileged white folks, especially us Jews who have suffered our own share of anti-Semitism, how do we combat this fresh wave of anti-Asianism? We have a responsibility here. If black lives and fried chicken matter, if Jewish lives and matzo balls matter, then God damn it, so do Asians and their wontons. Let me ruminate on that. Firstly, I think the folks most guilty of this evil prejudice are lazy, dumb white folk. It's their fault. And maybe all those really smart and industrious Asians, maybe they should just lower their GPAs and play dumb and not get into so many good colleges. I doubt any Asian worth their wonton would lower their GPA. That is a terrible idea. Nix that. Besides, we need our A students. When my beloved dad had his 2 aneurysms, it was his Chinese general practitioner, the Indian vascular specialist, and a platoon of Philippine nurses who saved his ass. If it wasn't for all those Asian A students, my dad'd be pushing up daisies at Hollywood forever. So maybe, this is a toughie. Maybe all those lazy, dumb white folks should just buckle down and raise their GPAs. Hire some tutors. Study harder. Just get fucking smarter. It's high time the dumb white folk, and you know who you are, you deplorables. It's time you raise your game. So there you have it, my 2 cents for whatever they're worth. And now I'm hungry. I'm ordering some Chinese food, or maybe some Thai. I think I'll get Korean, or better yet, some sushi, or shabu shabu. Gee whiz, my back is sore from sitting in front of this damn computer. Maybe I'll get myself a Thai massage, or a Chinese massage, or a Korean massage. Anyway, I gotta go. Till next time. Namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that I mean, namashaloha.